In the story of America, one institution has served as much more than a house of worship. It's a story of a people who were stripped of their names, their homes, and their freedom, but refused to have their souls stripped away, too. In the face of unimaginable brutality, they forged a faith in the fires of affliction. For African Americans, this institution has been a sanctuary from the storm. A schoolhouse for the mind, a hospital for the wounded soul, and a war room for the fight for freedom. This is the story of the African American Church, a center of hope, community, and unwavering resistance. This wasn't a faith handed down peacefully in quiet chapels. It was born in secret, whispered in the dead of night, in places where getting caught meant the whip, or worse. It was a theology of liberation, dreamed up by an oppressed people who looked at the chains on their hands and feet and dared to believe that God had a different plan. To understand the soul of Black America, you have to understand the institution that Black America built for itself, brick by brick, hymn by hymn, prayer by prayer. This isn't just a history of religion. This is the history of a people's survival. The story begins in darkness, both literal and metaphorical. During slavery, the formal practice of religion was often a tool of the oppressor. Slave masters preached a distorted gospel, a message of obedience, submission, and suffering on earth for a reward in a far-off heaven. It was a faith designed to pacify, to justify the institution of slavery itself. The spirit of a people isn't so easily contained. Away from the watchful eyes of the master, another church was born. Historians call it the invisible institution. It had no buildings, no formal hierarchy, no written creed. Its cathedrals were remote clearings in the woods, stiflingly hot cabins, and dense, insect-filled swamps. These secret meeting places were known as hush harbors. The name itself tells you everything. Here, under the cover of darkness, enslaved African Americans gathered at tremendous personal risk. To muffle their sounds, the passionate prayers, the sorrowful songs, the shouts of joy, they'd hang wet blankets or gather around a large pot of water, their voices directed downward to be absorbed. These hush harbors were more than just places to worship. They were acts of profound defiance. In a system designed to strip away every shred of humanity, these secret gatherings were where a new, distinctly African American Christianity was forged. It was a faith that blended the biblical stories of deliverance they had come to know with the resonant spiritual traditions brought with them from Africa. The call and response patterns, the rhythmic clapping, the spiritual dancing known as the ring shout, these were not just forms of worship, but acts of cultural preservation. They were a declaration that while their bodies might be owned, their spirits remained free. Out of this crucible of secret faith came the spirituals. These weren't just hymns. They were theological textbooks and coded maps for an oppressed people. On one level, they were profound expressions of sorrow and a deep yearning for justice. Songs like "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen" were a raw, honest cry to a God who understood suffering. But on another level, they were encoded with messages of resistance. "Wade in the water" could be a literal instruction for escaping slaves to use rivers to throw pursuing dogs off their scent. "Steal Away to Jesus" was often a coded call for a secret meeting in the hush harbor. These songs were the language of hope in a seemingly hopeless situation, a testament to a belief that earthly bondage was not the final word. The invisible institution also produced the first generation of Black leaders. Figures like Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey were preachers who saw in the Bible not a call for submission, but a divine mandate for liberation. They drew parallels between their own people's suffering and the Israelites' bondage in Egypt, and their sermons planted the seeds of organized resistance. While their rebellions were brutally suppressed, they showed the potent combination of faith and the fight for freedom that would come to define the Black church. Within these hush harbors, faith wasn't a passive comfort. It was an active, breathing force. It was where enslaved people could affirm their own self-worth, build community, and dream of freedom, all under a God who, they believed, stood on the side of the oppressed. It was the foundation upon which everything else would be built. With the end of the Civil War, the invisible institution could finally step into the light. What followed was an explosion of church building across the South, a physical manifestation of a spiritual freedom long held in secret. For the first time, African Americans could build, own, and control their own institutions, and the church was paramount. These weren't just simple wooden structures. They were monuments to freedom and self-determination. The establishment of independent denominations, like the AME Church founded by Richard Allen in Philadelphia after protesting segregation, set a precedent for Black leadership and autonomy. In the era of Reconstruction and the darkness of Jim Crow that followed, the African American church became the undisputed center of Black life. It was really the only institution where Black people could exercise genuine leadership, organize freely, and build community without the oppressive oversight of white society. It quickly became something far more than a house of worship. It became the schoolhouse, where Black children were denied public education. Churches opened their doors, hosting classes in their basements. Many of the nation's historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, find their roots in the educational missions of Black denominations. The church was also the main social and cultural center. It hosted community meetings, social gatherings, and political rallies. It provided a space for everything from choir rehearsals to quilting bees, fostering a rich cultural life that affirmed Black identity. Mutual aid societies, often run by the women of the church, acted like early insurance companies, providing financial support for widows, orphans, and the sick. The church was the glue that held the community together. And through it all, Black women were the undeniable backbone. While often denied formal leadership roles in the pulpit, they were the principal organizers, fundraisers, and educators. They ran the Sunday schools, organized social services, and maintained the daily life of the church, creating a space of moral and social authority. Their tireless work and strategic organizing were the engine that powered the church's expansive community role. The church also became the first training ground for political leadership. It was where future leaders learned how to organize, speak publicly, and mobilize their communities. Before they could run for public office, they ran for church office. Before they could organize a citywide boycott, they organized a church fundraiser. The skills, networks, and confidence honed within the four walls of the church would prove indispensable in the long battle for civil rights that lay ahead. The church wasn't just preparing souls for the afterlife. It was equipping a people to fight for their lives and their rights right here on earth. If the church was a pillar of community after emancipation, it became the strategic command center, the war room during the civil rights movement. As segregation and racial terror reached a fever pitch, the Black church transformed into the logistical and spiritual heart of the freedom struggle. Because it was an independent institution owned and operated by Black people. It was a safe haven for activists to organize beyond the reach of white economic and political control. This era saw the rise of the minister as a central figure in the fight for justice. The most iconic, of course, was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His philosophy of nonviolent direct action wasn't just a political strategy. It was a deeply theological one, rooted in the Christian teachings he preached from the pulpit. In 1957, after the Montgomery bus boycott, King and other minister activists like Fred Shuttlesworth and Ralph Abernathy founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC. The SCLC's very name showed its mission to harness the moral authority and organizational power of the church for civil rights. Mass meetings held in churches became the lifeblood of the movement. These weren't just planning sessions. They were spiritual revivals. They began and ended with prayer. Freedom Song spirituals adapted for the movement code through the sanctuaries, stealing the resolve of those about to face down police dogs, fire hoses, and jail cells. Songs like We Shall Overcome became anthems of the struggle, a powerful fusion of faith and protest. Nearly every major campaign of the civil rights movement was born in a church. The Montgomery bus boycott, which lasted an astonishing 381 days, was sustained by nightly mass meetings in the city's Black churches. The Birmingham Campaign of 1963, which aimed to desegregate the nation's most segregated city, was planned from the pulpits of churches like the 16th Street Baptist Church. This central role also made the church a target. The bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church on a Sunday morning in September 1963, which killed 4 young girls, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Denise McNair, was an act of terror designed to break the movement's spirit. But it had the opposite effect. It shocked the conscience of the nation and the world, galvanizing support for the cause and showing the terrible price of hatred. It solidified the church, not just as a place of strategy, but as a site of sacrifice. And once again, while men like Dr. King were the visible leaders, the movement was powered by the women who organized within these church communities. Women like Ella Baker, a key organizer for the SCLC, and Fannie Lou Hamer, whose soul-stirring testimony at the 1964 Democratic National Convention was steeped in the language of her faith, were indispensable. They organized voter registration drives, taught literacy in church basements, and were often the majority of the marchers on the front lines. The civil rights movement simply would not have happened without the determination and labor of Black women, whose activism was profoundly shaped by their faith. If this history resonates with you and you want to see more deep dives into the cultural forces that have shaped our world, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. And let us know in the comments, what role has a church or a spiritual community played in your own life or the life of your community? We'd love to hear your story. From the victories of the civil rights movement to the challenges of the 21st century, the role of the African American church keeps evolving. It's no longer the single undisputed center of Black life as it was during segregation. The very success of the civil rights movement opened up new paths for Black Americans, meaning the church is now one of many centers of influence. But its legacy as a force for hope and resistance endures, adapting to meet the needs of a new era. In the realm of social justice, the church remains a potent voice. While movements have changed, with decentralized, youth-led groups like Black Lives Matter often emerging outside traditional institutions, the church's influence is still deeply felt. Many pastors and congregations have been active in protests against police brutality, offering their buildings as safe havens and using their pulpits to make a theological case for justice. The church's role as a community hub for social services has also adapted. Recognizing persistent health disparities, many churches have become critical partners in public health. This role was thrown into sharp relief during the COVID-19 pandemic, as the virus disproportionately ravaged African American communities. Black churches stepped into the breach. They moved swiftly to provide accurate information and combat medical distrust. The vast majority of Black pastors encouraged their congregants to get vaccinated, and many opened their doors to serve as testing and vaccination sites, showing a remarkable commitment to community care. Spiritually, the church continues to be a place of healing and cultural affirmation. In an age of ongoing racial trauma, it offers a space for collective grieving and spiritual fortification. More and more, churches are also working to address the stigma around mental health, creating programs to support the emotional well-being of their communities. But the contemporary Black church is not without its own tough challenges. Like many religious institutions, it faces declining membership, particularly among younger generations. Millennials and Gen Z are often disconnected from the traditional church of their parents. There are also painful internal debates over issues like LGBTQ+ inclusion and the role of women in leadership. For some, the church that was a sanctuary for their ancestors has at times felt like a place of judgment. This has led many to leave, while others work passionately from within to create more inclusive spiritual homes. Economic pressures also pose a threat, as congregations in under-resourced communities struggle to maintain their ministries. The story of the African American church is one of impossible contradictions. It's the story of a faith adopted from an oppressor, yet transformed into a tool of liberation. It's an institution that has produced some of America's most radical freedom fighters, while also being criticized for social conservatism. It has been a sanctuary for the marginalized, and at times, source of pain for those who felt they didn't fit within its walls. But above all, it's a story of enduring, defiant, and world-changing hope. From the secret prayers whispered in hush harbors to the thunderous sermons that fueled a revolution. The Black church has been the cultural cauldron where African American identity was forged and preserved. It's been a school, a bank, a political forum, a social club, and a hospital for the soul. It taught a people how to sing in a strange land, how to organize for a better world, and how to believe in a future they could not yet see. Today, as it navigates new challenges, a changing demographic, political polarization, and its relevance in a more secular world, its legacy remains undeniable. The African American Church stands as a living testament to the power of faith to build community, fuel resistance, and hold a nation accountable to its highest ideals. Its story isn't over. The question now is how this vital institution will once again reinvent itself to continue its historic mission, to be a beacon of hope, a pillar of community, and an engine of resistance for generations to come.